Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to my free sports betting masterclass. This is going to be the perfect class for you if you're break even or, struggling to win and want to find some consistency in your sports betting results. What this class isn't, it's not a magic pill. It's not picks. This class is how to properly think about sports betting, learn how the sports betting market and ecosystem works, and then how to use strategy and discipline to extract money from that ecosystem. Okay, a little about me and why I'm releasing this course. So I'm John. I'm a professional sports bettor, and I've been betting on sports, playing poker, and trading as my primary income for the better part of 15 years. Why I'm making this course? I believe that a course like this should exist for free. It's a course that's not going to make you into Billy Walters. It's not going to make you millions of dollars. But what it is going to do is it's going to take you from losing or break even, and it's going to show you the tools to, if you decide to and put the work in, be consistently profitable. That's it. That's all. The point of the course is this. If somebody comes to you and they're like, hey, I'm interested in sports betting, but I don't really know what I'm doing, I want this course to be the thing that immediately pops to your mind as the thing you're going to send that person. If this is top of mind when you get asked about how to get, from zero to something sports betting, then I have succeeded. There's not going to be any ads or anything like that. So if you do want to help me out and this course has helped you, or some of my content in the past has helped you, the one thing that you can do is to show your friend that course if they're interested in betting and you think that it could help them. And if somebody is asking for a really good free intro level sports betting class, I don't want there to be any doubt that this is the best class to send them. So I hope you enjoy, and I hope you agree with me that this is the absolute top of the line intro to sports betting class, and it's free, but I would put it up against anything paid out there. So I hope you enjoy the class. I wanted to start out with just a quick video on kind of what to expect, mindset, and what you need to do to get the most out of this. So there's this great quote by Doyle Brunson. If you watch Poker After Dark, I think it was Poker After Dark, you would hear Doyle talking about, some classic quotes or whatever. And he said, this is a hard way to make an easy living, right? I think what he's talking about is when people think, professional poker player, professional sports bettor, it's that, people do that stuff for recreation, so it must be really fun. It must be really easy to make a living like that. And I think people get sucked into it early because, if you put a lot of work into it, it's an easy way to make some money. But it's an incredibly hard way to make a living. And there's a reason that, there's probably fewer professional gamblers than there are professional athletes. So I don't want to be killing the mood or whatever, but this is incredibly, incredibly difficult. And to expect otherwise would be to not manage your expectations properly. And while the work can be fun, it's going to look a lot different. Winning sports betting looks a lot different than recreational sports betting, right? Recreational sports betting, you might go to a game with your buddies, place a bet on the game, you're cheering the game. That is not what professional sports betting is. Professional sports betting often actually leads to people not enjoying sports anymore. For me, it's been the opposite because I've really taken a deep dive into one sport, and I think I really appreciate the nuance of the game of golf, which is the sport I bet, and learning more about it. Plus, I love that sport. So for me, I started to enjoy sports a little more, but for a lot of people, they won't even watch sports if they're betting for an income. And the other thing is betting for an income. It means different things. So if you're early in your journey, if you're just learning sports betting, you shouldn't expect to go from beginner to professional bettor, like an actual professional bettor who lives off their gambling winnings in a year, right? What you should be hoping for is maybe to add some supplemental income to hopefully another source, a main source of income. Now, if you've been supplementing your income with betting for a while, you're an established winner. Now, there'll be tools in here also that I believe that will take you from there, which I've been to full-time, which I am now, but it's taken me years to get to this point. So don't expect it to be, oh, in 2 months you can, make all this money. That's not what this is. It would be disingenuous to say that is what this is. This is about building slowly a foundation that will make you weather the storms, the short-term and long-term storms in professional betting. And it could even apply outside of sports betting. I've played poker, blackjack, and other things as an advantage player. So these lessons are kind of timeless, and I've been a trader. So these lessons are applicable to all risk fields, but it takes a lot of time and effort to learn properly. And the Academy, it's not a silver bullet. So I designed this because when I was learning, especially when I was switching from poker, which had a lot of educational and a lot of educational communities, a lot of resources, a lot of training videos, to sports betting, sports betting had none of that. So for me, educational content and communities was a key part of my poker learning. And it wasn't a silver bullet. Like, there's plenty of people who would log in and get memberships to card runners to run it once, and they would still lose money because they wouldn't, be active in the forums, make connections, actually watch the videos and implement what they learned. Like, ultimately, the people that were successful were the people that really bought in and did, gave it 100%. So the Academy is not going to make you a winner by itself. But what I want it to do is to shortcut the process and to make it as easy as possible, both from a learning of technical knowledge and networking, combine them into one place because they're both so important, to make it for you to be able to put the effort in, get the least resistance on your path to being a winner. But ultimately, it will all come down to the effort that you put in. And I'm hoping that, if you do put the effort in, the product is good enough where you'll see really good results. And the only shortcuts, I talked about networking, but what I do think there are, like, some shortcuts. I just want to get to these quickly. Consistency. So doing an hour or two every day is better than doing, 10 hours one day, taking 4 days off, and 10 hours another day. I truly believe this. I think because knowledge compounds. So if you come in the next day, you're more quickly building off that previous day's knowledge. You don't have to relearn anything. So if you do want to kind of shortcut your time, I would start to spend maybe an hour or two a day, watching videos, talking to other people, forming a group where you ask questions back and forth, interacting with me, whatever it is. If you just do this consistently, you'll be shocked at how much of a cheat code that is. Networking, talked about it a little bit, but it's so important. I mean, if there's one way to shortcut your time learning anything, it's to find somebody who's done it before and failed and done all, fallen into all the traps. That's me, that's other people in the Academy. So please, feel free to ask questions when you're stuck. It's going to be the most time effective thing you can do learning. And then I would say, like, focus learning. So it's, if you watch a video, I did this with poker where I would, like, watch Philly Alphon videos and I would just, like, fall asleep. But if I watched it and, like, took some notes and, applied it to my game thoughtfully, next time I play poker, I'd be like, this one concept I'm applying. It's like you watch a video, you learn some, code or whatever it is, and you just apply that one thing, be thoughtful with it, and make sure, like, it sticks with you. Because, I think aimless practice is kind of just helps us maybe feel like we're being productive, but the goal should be actually to make money. So just do the things that make you money, and that's going in with an intent, practicing, getting actually better. So I think those three things, consistency, network, focus, learning, are the three things that you want to go into this course with. And then on top of that, the understanding that this is incredibly hard work, and it's not an easy, like, get rich quick scheme. It's a job, but it's a fun job, and you learn a lot of things that apply to other areas of your life and make those better. So I genuinely believe it's worth learning, but I need to stress how difficult this is before you get into it. So with that being said, let's have some fun. All right, so the goal of this course is to take you from being a recreational Ray to a sharp Steve in as little time as possible. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to stack skills on top of each other until you get from a Ray to a Steve. Simple as that. First thing we have to do is lay the foundation, and the foundation is mindset. Now, I think a lot of the mindset talk in the space right now, it's a little wishy-washy, it's like think positive, get up and seize the day. That doesn't really matter, but more importantly, it doesn't help us. Like, what are we supposed to get from that? And what I want to talk about are the mindset similarities between all sharp Steves because, think positive. I know plenty of people who make way more money than me who are really, really negative thinkers. It doesn't matter. It doesn't affect them. Like, thinking positively is not going to win you a bet, but there are important mindset steps you have to take first. Before we can do the rest of the course, we have to get your mind trained to think like a sharp. Okay. So the first thing we have to do is get rid of 3 limiting beliefs that most recreational Rays have and no sharp Steves have, right? Belief number 1, and we've heard this, we hear this all the time. It's the house always wins. The house always wins. You hear that TV, movies, your uncle's telling you at Thanksgiving when you say, "Oh, I might be trying to get into this sports betting thing." The house always wins, whatever, quit while you're ahead. I'm here to tell you, the house doesn't always win. I've beaten the house in a variety of different games over a long period of time, and I have friends, colleagues who've won way more money across games such as roulette, blackjack, sports betting, people who've beaten the lottery, other table games. It's doable. It's actually not that hard. And that's what the casino doesn't really want you to know, is that it's not that hard to beat them. They'd rather have you believe that they always win, because then you come in and you don't try to win. But what you need to do is you need to cross through that wall that gets you into the Steve mindset, because you have to first believe it's beatable, or else why would you try? You'll be hopeless. So first you have to understand and truly believe that there are edges to be had in the casino. All you have to do is go in, look for them, wait for the opportunity to present itself, and then take it. The casinos, they want more of a recreational Ray type, going in to gamble, bemoaning their luck. Oh, you can't win, whatever, it's rigged. It's not, right? There's plenty of opportunities, and the first thing you have to do is internalize that and believe it. Limiting belief number 2 that some recreational Rays have that sharp Steves don't is, I'm unlucky. You're unlucky, right? Nobody's inherently lucky or unlucky. Now, people can have good or bad luck over the course of their lives, right? And plenty of situations come up where, a card here could shape the course of someone's life, like Chris Moneymaker winning the World Series. That, who knows if I'd be sitting here today if it wasn't for that. But that is just variance, right? It doesn't mean that certain people are going to be more lucky in the future. If you take 2 people and you're like, okay, this person's lucky, so they'll be luckier over the next year, that's not a thing. Luck is just neutral across people in terms of predictive value. So this is an example, and this is who we don't want to be. We all have that friend, we know that person who, you tell them, hey, I'm betting the Lakers tonight. And they'll be like, oh, I won't bet them because I want you to win. With the understanding that if they bet them, then the Lakers will in fact lose because they're unlucky, right? Like, I'm unlucky. Not true. Bullshit. Makes no sense. It's not like when that player bets on the Lakers, LeBron gets a text, oh, this guy bet on our team, I better play like shit. No, that's not a thing, right? And logically, when we think about it, that's doesn't make any sense. But I do believe that people deep down think they're unlucky, and it's not a belief that serves you in gambling, because if you just believe truly that you're unlucky, you're gonna think there's nothing you can do to win long term because the odds are stacked against you, the deck's stacked against you. It's not your fault you lose, right? Because you're unlucky. Can't think like that, because advantage gambling is a game of inputs and outputs, and you have to believe that if you do the right things, you will make money in the long run. If you don't believe that, you will not make it an advantage gambling and sports betting and whatever. So you have to believe that at least you're just neutral luck. If you want to believe you're lucky, I will allow that, because it will make you a little more resilient. You know, Phil Galfond said that he just chooses to believe he's lucky, even though he knows he's, you know, luck is neutral amongst people, because it helps him, you know, have a positive attitude and have some resilience in his practice. It just works. Very interesting. I trust what Phil says. So you can either believe that you're neutral luck or you're lucky, but you cannot believe that you're unlucky. And limiting belief number 3 is I'm not good enough at math to beat sports betting. Now, my last math class, I believe, was senior year of high school. And I can tell you now, there's people in sports betting that make millions and millions of dollars that if you put them in an 8th grade math test, they'd fail. Like, now there are a lot of applications for math in sports betting. I think, like, if you were to take it further, it would be wise to, you know, brush up on your math skills and your computer programming skills. In this course, though, I'm going to teach this so it's accessible to everybody. So all you have to have is like a 4th grade understanding of math, and you're going to be able to beat sports betting following the steps in this course. That's the goal of the course. I'm trying to make this as accessible for as many people as possible. So if you're worried about, you know, there's going to be too much math for me, please stick with me, watch on. It's not going to be the case. This is all going to be very easy to understand. Okay, so now that we've gotten rid of those limiting beliefs, we're ready to take the next step when it comes to advantage gambling mindset, the sports betting mindset, and understand how sharp Steves think differently than recreational Rays, because that's where the big difference lies. It's really how they view sports betting. So you could think about it like this. You could see two people. You could see a Steve and a Ray at the counter of a sports book, both throwing out thousands of dollars across many different sports. And to the untrained eye, they would look exactly the same, right? But what's going on, you know, underneath, what's going on in here is extremely different. And that's where the big separation takes place between these two, is how are they viewing this? Why are they doing this, right? So let's get into the mindset, the beliefs, and the reasons for betting that separate Steve from a Ray. So number one is their why. Why do they do this? Recreational Rays, as in their name, do this for recreation. Now, it could be just like a healthy hobby, an escape. It could be, you know, they could have a gambling problem. There's a wide variety of types of recreational Rays, but the main thing that they're looking for, I believe, is an escape, and for this to not feel at all like a job or work. It is exactly the opposite for sharp Steves. Steves treat this as a for-profit enterprise. That is why they're here, and that is what they're doing. They make no mistake what they're here for. It's not ambiguous. They are here. They're sports betting to make money, period. Now, they could enjoy it. That's fine. But when they're placing their bets, they are doing it because they believe through some systematic way that this bet has a positive expected value to them. A recreational Ray is placing a bet because maybe they think the same thing, but they don't actually believe this. They are hoping that this could win, or they want to, you know, see something they see something on ESPN, and then they throw some money on it because it, you know, feels like a lock or whatever. But they're not systematically thinking about this, and they're certainly not trying to do this as a for-profit enterprise, right? They're hoping to get lucky. Sharp Steves, they're just hoping to place as many bets as they can, and over time they know that they'll come out ahead against the house if they can, you know, get enough bets down where it will even out their good and their bad luck. So if we want to be like Steve, we have to take this seriously, and we have to treat this as a way to make money, not as recreation, not as something fun. This shouldn't be something that you're pretending to do for profit also, because this is an easy trap to fall into. You tell yourself you're doing this for profit, but ultimately you're just gambling. That's not going to work. You have to be honest with yourself and understand why you're doing this. And if you think that you can do this in a way that is geared towards making money, right? So that's number one. The number two reason that recreational Rays and Sharp Steves differ in their view of sports betting is the classic thing we hear in terms of referring to sports betting as Vegas, as the line or whatever it is. Vegas thinks the Cowboys are going to win, or whatever it is. That's what you'll hear from a lot of recreational players. They'll call it Vegas. Oh, Vegas rigged this. Vegas is always right. Blah, 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 blah. They think about this. They think about their opponent in sports betting as some kind of hard to define grand force, this big villain, Vegas, that is all knowing, right? Sharp Steves don't think that way. What they do is they understand the reality of sports betting, which is it's a market of different participants. There are different sports books. Actually, the biggest, the sports books that are taking the most action in sports betting are in Costa Rica. They're not in Las Vegas, right? So I don't know, why this is perpetuating, but Steves understand, okay, like the sports betting market is made up of information being shared between bettors and books. Books get to see bettors' information and they'll decide to move a number, not move a number. Sharp Steves want to understand, like, why does a book post this number? Why does it move the number? Do they copy this other sports book? What sports does this sports book know well? What limits are they taking? They're trying to think about all of this because they understand the reality of what sports betting is. It's a multiplayer game, as Matt Davidow and Ed Miller would say. It's a multiplayer game, and that's played between us, the bettors, other bettors, sports books, and we're all trying to figure out which information is valuable, which information is not valuable, and do the best we can with it. But you can only play this game properly if you understand what game you're playing. Recreational Rays don't understand the game. They still think in terms of Vegas, right? Sharp Steves understand the game, and in understanding, they are able to figure out where the weaknesses are in the game and exploit them. Okay, the number three difference in how recreational Rays and Sharp Steves view sports betting is Sharp Steves, they're much more like a sniper. They're hiding in the bushes. They're waiting for a good bet to come along, pick it off back into the bushes, right? They aren't forcing anything. Now, that's not to say they're not making a ton of bets a day, but what they do is they have a criteria, they have a system, and when a bet fulfills the criteria that is that go sign for them to bet, they take it and then they go back and they wait for another bet to come along. They're not saying, I'm going to place, 10 bets today. Let me find the best 10 bets. They're just like, I'm going to place bets when they show value. And if there's no bets that show value, I will not bet. That would not make sense to a recreational Ray. Imagine a recreational Ray going into a casino and going into the sports book, and you say, oh, there's no value, I'm not betting today. His mind would be blown. Like, he's like, I'm here to gamble, I'm here to have fun, all right? I'm gonna, I think that's a good bet. We'll bet that, we'll watch it. That's not how Sharp Steve thinks. Now, the reality of it is, someone who's sharp is going to be placing a lot more bets than someone who's more recreational or square, but don't mistake that for them forcing bets. What they have is a criteria of, they have a criteria that they're looking for first, and then they let the bets come to them. They don't go and change their criteria. They're just sitting there waiting, see value, boom, pick it off, pick it off, pick it off. And that's an advantage that we have as bettors because we get to bet on whatever we want. The sports book has to post lines on everything. So Steves are playing the game the proper way because they're using that advantage to only pick off the prime spots and press that advantage as hard as they can against the sports book. All right. The final big mindset difference between recreational Rays and Sharp Steves is Sharp Steves treat their sports betting like a business, right? And what does this entail? The Sharp Steve is going to keep detailed records of their bets. Now, this is going to be both for tracking their progress and for important accounting purposes come year end, right? Paying taxes and whatnot. But a Steve is always going to be inquisitive about, okay, am I winning? Am I losing? How am I doing? Is this working? Keeping detailed records so they can see how they're doing that year. My experience with people who are more towards recreational Ray status is they don't want to know how they're doing, and they certainly don't keep records, right? they're gonna often say things like, oh, I'm about break even, or like, if it weren't for betting baseball, I'd be up. Stuff like that. Because here's the thing. 2% of people win at this. Probably 80% of people think they win at this, and another 10 think they break even. It is a psychologically difficult game because it's hard to admit that you're losing money at this when it doesn't really make sense for you financially to be doing it, right? So the recreational Rays are going to do anything they can to avoid the hard truth that they're losing money, right? That's not a concern for Sharp Steves. Like, you want to know when you're losing. There's certainly been times when I've been deploying a losing strategy, and if I didn't, for somehow tried to ignore the fact and kept doing it, I'd be broke, right? You'll just go broke. So when you're doing this seriously, you want to know when you're losing. That's the most important information, because the one thing you can't do in this is go broke. Avoid that at all costs. To do that, you need to be tracking yourself and being honest with yourself. And that's something that all Sharp Steves are doing. Very few recreational Rays are doing, right? Steves are also going to look for operational efficiencies. So this is stuff that happens outside of the process for finding a bet. This is the process for getting money down on the bet. Now, is that, figuring out how to make sure their money is properly allocated across sportsbooks. So in case, a bet comes up, they're able to quickly act on it, or make sure they, automate some part of their process so they get alerts if, a certain book posts their line. Stuff like that is going to be really helpful for a Sharp Steve, because they're constrained by time. You can't bet on everything. You can't bet on every good edge, but the more you increase your operational speed and you give yourself some hours back, the more you can spend finding new bets or making more money, right? So to a Sharp Steve, operational efficiencies are actually really valuable. They would not be valuable to a recreational Ray because they're losing money. So they should be placing 0 bets. And if they have some kind of algorithm that trades on their plays, they would just lose all their money faster. So it doesn't really cross like a recreational Ray's mind to consider the stuff outside of finding a bet as important. But to a Sharp Steve, the stuff that you do like off the table, as we'd say in poker, when it comes to being more efficient, getting down more money, getting better information, whatever it is vital to a practice as a really good sports bettor. So you're not just thinking about how do I get the number, but it's like, how can I make more money with the information I have? How can I tighten up my operations, automate what I can, and squeeze the most I can out of this, right? And that's how Steves are thinking. And the last thing a Steve is going to be willing to do that it wouldn't make sense for Ray to do is invest in software, R&D, and things like these. So there's plenty of odds screens out there that give you an advantage as a bettor, help you see the markets, might help you find bets, or automate your process a little bit better. There's plenty of software. We use a ton of software. It's very valuable, and I don't know any serious bettor that isn't using something. Now for a Ray, like, it wouldn't matter because they're losing. They don't want to, they're not going to see. They're going to be like, wow, it's too much to spend $100 a month on this odd screen. But instead, what they're going to do is they're going to lose like $400 a month, and also not think it's important to buy the odd screen, because what would they do with it, right? We have to be willing as Sharp bettors, because we're thinking about this like a business now, to invest in the business. So when you get to a certain bankroll size, there's tools that are going to be plus EV to you that are going to seem like a lot of money, right? Like $100 odds screen. I mean, we use Spank Odds. That's $5.50 a month, but it's so worth it. Like I wouldn't operate without it, because it's just worth that much extra money to us, right? So you're going to have to be willing to invest in yourself and willing to spend the money. Now, don't go wild, right? We're trying to be frugal, but when you're spending money to make yourself a better bettor, that is going to be money well spent. But that's only something that Steve is doing. It doesn't really make sense for a Ray, right? So Steves are looking for opportunities to spend some money to either give themselves some time back, find new edges, whatever it is. These are all valuable things to a Steve, right? So they're looking for places to invest in their betting, right? Okay, so that concludes the key mindset shifts that we need to make to be able to best apply the strategies in the rest of the course. So if we can get ourselves thinking like a sharp Steven now, everything that comes later is going to be way easier when you see it through these frameworks and when you see it through the eyes of a sharp bettor. It's not that difficult. This is all common sense stuff. But I want to make sure that you don't just know this or think about it, that you believe it, because that's the key. Is you have to internalize this and be ready to go in these next lessons so that you can take those systems and hit the ground running. Now we're going to take the next step on our journey from being a recreational Ray to a sharp Steve. And this part is going to be understanding the basics of sports betting. So this is going to be truly like a 101, what is a sports bet, what do different odds mean, what's a parlay. If you think that you know most of the stuff already, this is the one module I think you can skip if you're a little bit further along in your sports betting journey. But I need to make sure that I cover this just in case we have people who are joining us from other fields or whatnot. Like, let's say you're somebody who's coming over from the financial markets and you understand risk, and the first chapter clicked with you on mindset, but you actually don't know what a point spread is. Well, this is the chapter where you're just going to get a quick refresh on that, and then after you have this down, you have the mindset down, then we're ready to go into the strategy, into actually the fun stuff of how do we go and take the book's money, how do we be a bad customer, right? Because that's the goal, to make everybody here a bad sportsbook customer. So stick with me on this course or on this module if you are new to sports betting. If you're a little bit more advanced, I would recommend skipping to module 4. All right, welcome to module 3 of the course. Now, in this module, like I said before, we're going over the basics of sports betting, right? So this is going to be aimed at somebody who's coming into sports betting completely fresh. So like I said before, if this seems like information you already know, maybe consider skipping to module 4. If you're new to sports betting and you want a rundown of the industry in as quick a way as possible, stick with me here. First, we have to know, what is a sports bet, right? What are we doing? So now, some of you may know this, but let's just say that we want to place a bet, the same thing as the flip of a coin. You're betting on a coin flip, right? You bet $1. If the coin flip wins, you get your $1 plus someone else's $1. If it loses, you lose your $1. That's the same thing as a sports bet, but the coin flip is just a sporting event. So instead of a coin flip, it might be a game between the Chiefs and the Patriots. And you've bet on the Chiefs and someone else has bet on the Patriots. And if the Chiefs win, you win your $1 plus their $1. And if the Chiefs lose, you lose your $1 to your opponent. Simple as that, right? Now, your opponent in the sake of sports betting isn't often going to be your friend. It's going to be a corporation or a person known as a bookmaker or a bookie. Now, I'm going to more deal with the legal regulated sports books. Those are going to be like DraftKings, FanDuel, Caesars, BetMGM, right? Circa, and whatnot. There's, an industry out there we all know. We've seen the movies, the videos of the guy in the smoke-filled back room of the bar, booking bets on his pen and paper. Now, that still exists to some extent, but since we have large influx of legal sports books in the United States, we will be focusing on those more. So in this coin flip example, in this Chiefs versus Patriots example, your opponent, the person that you're either taking $1 from or giving $1 to, is a sports book such as FanDuel, right? And in this situation where it's basic, right? You win $1, you lose $1. The reality of sports betting is it's not often going to be 1-to-1, $1 to $1. So in this situation, we have the Chiefs. Now, at the time of recording, the Chiefs are a very good team. And at the time of recording, the Patriots are a very bad team. So in the reality of the example would be, you would probably have to put up $5 on the Chiefs, and your opponent would probably have to put up $1 on the Patriots. The price is going to change. So if you win, you get your opponent's $1. But if the Patriots win, your opponent will take your $5. And again, your opponent is a sportsbook like FanDuel. So this difference in payout amounts and risk amounts is known as the odds. It's the same. It's price, it's odds, it's probability. It's all kind of the same word for essentially trying to fairly set prices for uneven events, right? For events that might not occur to be 50-50, but might occur to be like 80-20 in chances of happening. Like the Chiefs are 80% to beat the Patriots, and the Patriots are 20% to beat the Chiefs, right? So in the next video, we're going to talk about odds, break-even percentages, different types of odds, and that's going to all be centered around the different payouts that are going on with that coin flip. All right, so I appreciate everybody for listening to this first module. We're going to get back onto our path of making you a terrible sportsbook customer in the next video. All right, welcome back on our journey to turn everybody into the worst sportsbook customer in the entire world. Right now, we're going to talk about odds. Odds are the basis for basically everything in sports betting. And you often hear people say, if they're talking about a game they're about to watch on TV, oh, what are the odds? What are the odds on the Chiefs? What are the odds Mahomes goes over, 275 yards? Something like that. Odds are just a gambling term for probability, right? In the previous video, we talked about the coin flip example, where if you flip a coin, if you were betting with a friend and you had a coin, you might bet, if you win the coin flip, your friend gives you $1. If your friend wins a coin flip, you give them $1. That would be what we call even odds, right? And a coin flip is a 50-50 event. So right there, those are the fair odds. Half the time you should win, half the time your friend should win. In the end, you basically break about even over a long number of coin flips, right? But let's say you're rolling a die and you want to pick a number on the die, right? A die 1 through 6, or standard die. And your friend said, oh, well, if you pick the number 2, your friend says, oh, if you hit 2, I'll give you $1. If you don't hit 2, then you give me $1. You'd be like, wait, that doesn't seem fair, because for you to win, you have to hit 2. For your friend to win, you would have to hit 1, 3, 4, 5, 6. A lot higher likelihood that your friend wins. Your friend actually should win 5 out of 6 times. So what you would do in that situation is you would adjust the payout, right? If you hit a 2, then your friend gives you $5. And if you don't, you give your friend $1. In this situation now, what's going to happen is 5 times out of 6, you're going to give your friend $1. And then the other time, your friend's going to give you $5. Over time, now you're breaking even again, just like the coin flip example, but you had to adjust the payouts to make it fair. The sports example of this, let's say we have the Chiefs playing against the Patriots, like we did last example. Now, let's just say they're evenly matched, okay? Go back in time or whatever. And now you have a line where it's 50-50. Great. But let's say you want to bet on the Chiefs to win the Super Bowl. And this is early in the season, right? It's hard to win the Super Bowl. It takes, you're going to have to make the playoffs. You're going to have to win, knockout rounds in the playoffs. If you're lucky enough to even get a bye, if not, you have to play an extra game. Then you have to win the Super Bowl. Odds to win the Super Bowl are often like 8-1, 9-1 for even the best teams, right? And it's clearly a harder thing to do is win the Super Bowl than just win your game this week. So there have to be different payouts, odds, or what we would call percentages, right? These are just probabilities, right? You're trying to basically create a payout structure that's true to the implied probability of the event. Now, when we're considering odds, we always have to think in terms of probability. That's how we as a bettor are going to be able to determine if an event is worth betting on or not. And what I mean by that is we have to figure out what we think the probability is, and then what the break-even, now this is important, the break-even probability of the bet. How often does the bet need to win to break even. And if you think that the event's going to happen more than the break even probability, it's a positive bet. And I'm going to break that down into more detail in the next video, because that's a very important concept in becoming a horrible, terrible sportsbook customer. Welcome back to the journey of recreational Ray to Sharp Steve. And this is a very, very important. This is a very, very important video in this module. I think it's probably one of the only ones that is an absolute requirement for you to watch over and over until you understand it. And it is the idea of converting odds to a break-even percentage and what that means for us as bettors. Okay. Now let me give you an example. You go to a sportsbook and you see an offer, you see a bet up there we're gonna keep with our Chiefs Pats example, right? You see a bet and they're offering Chiefs minus 110 versus the Patriots. Now, first of all, what the hell does minus 110 mean, right? What does it mean? Minus 110 is how odds are often shown in the United States. It's known as American odds. I believe they're also common to Canada. European odds are a little bit different. For this video, since we're focusing on the United States sportsbooks, we're going to focus on American odds. Minus 110 means that you have to bet $110 to win $100. So any negative American odds, so if it's minus 110, minus 200, whatever it is simply saying that's the amount that you have to wager to win 100. What they're not saying is you have to bet that much. Not every bet has to win $100. It's just giving you a ratio, right? So for example, let's say you had a minus 200 bet. That means you need to bet $200 to win a profit of 300. So if you bet 200, you won the bet, you'd get your 200 back plus an additional $100, right? That 100 would be the profit. Minus 200, you win, you get 300 total back. 100 of it is profit. The other 200 is your original stake. So that could be, let's say that you're betting a minus 200 bet and you bet $20. It's the same thing. You can bet $20 on a minus 200 bet. You don't have to bet to win 100. But in the case of betting $20 at minus 200, you would win $10 of profit, plus you get your $20 back that you bet, right? So all American odds are doing they're basically creating a ratio for you. And in a weird way, they're setting up, like, think of it like this. If you bet 200, you'll win 100. And then you're like, okay, and now I can apply that to any other amount. The flip side, and that's minus odds, right? The flip side is plus odds. American odds are weird. So if you don't understand this, that's totally okay. With this course, I'm going to release a couple of materials that make understanding the odds, conversions, and probabilities a lot easier. But stick with me for this because I'm going to try and explain it first time on video. So plus American odds mean that if you bet $100, whatever the number is the profit you get back. So let's say you have a plus 200 bet. That means that if you bet $100, and the bet wins, you would get 200 of profit plus your original 100 back. Okay. So the difference between a plus 200 and a minus 200 is what the sportsbook's saying is they think the minus 200 bet is likely to win. You're likely to win that bet. So they're not going to pay you a high amount for winning it because the probability of you winning is large. The flip side goes for the plus 200. They say that's a long shot bet. It's something that might be a little less likely to happen. So they're rewarding you for taking that risk and giving you a higher payout. Okay. So that is American odds. And now we have to think about how do we view American odds properly to be a plus EV better. The way to view American odds, or any odds really, is to think in terms of what we call break-even percentages. So first is the simple answer of, the simple example of the coin flip we've been talking about, where you and your friend each are betting $1 on the coin flip. If you win the coin flip, then you get your friend's $1. If they win, they get your $1. the break-even percentage of a coin flip is, in that case, the 1-to-1 payout, right, is 50%. Because to break even in the terms of that bet, you have to win 50% of the time. So if you make 100 bets and you win half of them, 50, then that means you will end up with exactly $0 of profit or loss in that scenario, which is the break even percentage. Okay, break even odds part 2. Now that we understand the coin flip example, which is pretty basic, right? We understand that if I'm betting 1, my friend's betting 1, we each win 50% of coin flips, then we're going to break even over time. Why does it matter though? Why is this so important for real betting? Now this is where it comes into play. What you want to do is you want to find a situation where the break-even odds are actually lower than the true odds of something happening. So in the case of the coin flip, the true odds of a coin flip are 50%, right? So if the payout structure is 1-to-1, then we would say, okay, we're gonna win and lose equally. We're not gonna make any money, 0 profit, 0 expected value, right? That coin flip's not gonna net us any money. But now let's say our friend is a little crazy and he decides he wants some action. He's willing to offer us 2 of his dollars for 1 of our dollar. Okay, so now we have a bet that if we win, we win $2, and if we lose $1. Now in American odds, that would be a plus $200 bet. What is the break-even percentage of a plus 200 bet? Well, how many coin flips would we need to win to break even? And if you think about it, basically we just have to win 1 of every 3. So what would happen is we win 1, make 200, lose 1, lose 100, lose 1, lose 100, back at 0. So every 3 coin flips, you just have to win 1 to break even. But it's a coin flip, you're going to win half. So the break-even probability is below the true probability of the event happening, and that means over time we will win money. What's going to happen is we'll win half. So 1 coin flip, we win 200, next coin flip, we lose 100. Overall, we're netting $100 over those 2 coin flips, and we're making $50 per flip. That's a great deal. So those are the sports bets we want to find. So in that same vein, let's say we were given a bet of plus 200 on a sports team. But when we throw it into our model or whatever we're using to determine the true probability, which we will talk about later, so don't worry, we'll talk about that. And our true probability is 50%. That's a bet. It's the same thing as a coin flip, right? So you can always go back to that coin flip analogy when you're trying to kind of understand the weird numbers and odds of sports betting. Just remember, an event is the same thing as a coin flip or a roll of the die, right? When you're thinking in terms of the payouts and the probability. All we're trying to find is an event with an implied probability of the payout lower than the true probability of the event happening. That's a winning sports bet. The other way around is a losing sports bet. So let's say that you're on the other side of that. So you have a minus 200 bet on a team that only should win 50% of the time. Now the true probability of a minus 200 is 2/3, right? It's the exact opposite of the plus 200, but the true probability is 50%. So right there, you have essentially a true probability that's lower than the implied probability, and you would be losing money on that bet. So that is how we evaluate. That's how, if you break it down to the most simple, basic level, that's how we evaluate every sports bet, based on implied probability and true probability. So I hope that made sense. Now let's quickly go over the common bets you're going to see when you log into your sportsbook screen, because we will be doing that in the next video. We will be moving to the sportsbook trying to take their money. So we got to know what we're looking at, okay? The most common bet you'll see, and this is for 2 teams playing each other, is a spread bet. This is common in football, basketball, not as common in hockey, not as common in baseball. But a spread bet is basically like, it's a handicap. Think of it like a starting score. It's like a starting handicap for a team. So let's say one team is a lot better than the other team. Go back. We're going with the Chiefs Pats. I don't know why I've committed to this matchup in this video, but I just have. So we have the Chiefs, and they're much better than the Pats. So if you want to basically, and spreads exist basically to offer coin flip odds on two uneven teams. The Chiefs, you would never have the Chiefs and the Pats both at minus 110, which is a common sportsbook line for one of these matchups, if it was just to win. But let's say the Chiefs have a spread, have to give the Pats 10 points. So the Pats start with 10 points according to the bet. And then if their score plus 10 beats the Chiefs, then they win the bet. The spread is literally a handicap. Think of it like the golf handicap system, or a starting score where one team who's a little weaker gets to start with some extra points. That's a spread. A spread is annotated by either a minus or a plus. The favorite is going to be minus. So that means if you were to bet on the Chiefs with that spread, the Chiefs would have to win by 10 or more for them to win the bet. They would be minus 10. The Pats would be plus 10. Every spread has exact opposite, right? So the Pats at plus 10, they just need to lose by 9 points to win the game. If they lose by 10, then they push. The bet's a wash. And if they lose by 11, the bet loses. Common, these can be done in first halves, quarters, everything. In sports betting, you'll see the menu is really wide. There's a lot of derivatives, but it all kind of comes down to these main bets. So that's the spread. Now let's talk about the total. Total is just the combined score of both teams. So very common in every sport. It's probably the second major market of any sport. And you have basically over, under on how many points both teams will score combined. Now, there will also be individual team totals. There will be quarter totals, half totals, full game totals. Just think of it like this. In that Pats Chiefs game, say the total is 44. If the Pats score 24 points and the Chiefs score 30 points, they've scored 54 points. That means they've gone over the total, and the over would win, the under would lose. So you bet over or under on a total. Will they score over that amount of points? Will they score under that amount of points? And essentially the total is, what they try and do with the total is they try and put it at a number where the odds will be 50-50 on either side, according to Vegas, right? They're trying to take something like minus 10 over, minus 110 under, the total and the spread are designed to try and create a coin flip opportunity for the bettor. Unlike the third thing, which is the money line. That's just who wins, right? So we talked about the Pats and the Chiefs. Chiefs are a big favorite. They would be something like minus 500 to win that game. Pats could be, could be like plus 420. The difference, as you notice, they don't add up, and they'll never add up, whether it's a total, a spread, a money line, is that distance between the two, minus 500 plus 420, whatever it is the juice. So that means the house is kind of collecting that middle amount by basically being able to bet plus 500 and also bet minus 420, right? That's how the house makes money. They're just kind of, they will take a bet, but they also have the opportunity to arbitrage their position by being able to buy and sell, buy at a lower price, sell at a higher price. However, the money line, back to the money line, it's simply just who wins the game. Common in hockey and baseball, where the spread bets aren't as interesting as in basketball and football, but that one's the most straightforward. You literally just bet on a team to win. If you bet on an underdog, you're going to get plus odds. If you bet on a favorite, you're going to get minus odds. Pretty straightforward, right? The fourth is player props. Now, this is huge. This is honestly this is becoming one of the biggest markets in sports right now, because fantasy sports has had such a big influence on the sports betting world, whether it's companies like FanDuel and DraftKings, who are big fantasy sports companies now being, the biggest sports books, or it's just a whole generation that grew up playing, fantasy football on Yahoo, who's now of betting age. Player props are essentially you just bet on the performance of that player in that game. Does Pat Mahomes have over 270 passing yards? like a total bet, yes, no, over, under. They'll set odds for that, and they'll try and, set that number at about 50-50, right? How many, will Travis Kelce score a touchdown? Yes or no, and they'll put odds on that. Very common. Then there's other sites that just offer player props, Underdog, Prize Picks. Some of those sites, they're only player prop sites, and they classify as DFS. They are sports books, but it's for legal reasons, whatever, they're DFS. Long story short, there's so many player props. Basically, like anything you can probably imagine right now is being offered somewhere as a player prop. And these provide great opportunities because there's so many of them for us as bettors to find small edges, whether it's an injury, and we know who's going to come in and play for that player who's gotten injured, or, we have a different way of valuing a player and we realize like they're going to get more minutes, or they're going to change to number 2 in the lineup or something. Like there's a lot of players to keep track of, and it provides opportunities in a lot of places. So player props are a must because they're becoming a bigger and a bigger part of sports betting. Okay, so those are the 4 main types of bets. Now that we know that, we got to talk about parlays. They're a little more complicated, but not too complicated. Something you need to know though before logging into the sportsbook. Okay, now let's talk about parlays. I'm sure you've heard people, say, just missed this big parlay by, someone fumbling, or that parlays are for suckers or whatever. The thing is, people will say parlays are for suckers, but the math isn't there to support that. It doesn't necessarily, like if you're a bad bettor, adding, using a parlay will make you even worse. If you're a good bettor, it'll make you even better. So let me explain quickly what a parlay is, because we want to be the bettors that effectively use them. I use them all the time. I think it's very important. Like I almost always parlay, again, because it sends a signal to the sportsbook you might be a more recreational customer, as that's who tends to like to parlay. So if you can parlay effectively, it's actually a really powerful strategy for giving you a little more longevity in the sportsbook, looking a little more like a recreational Ray, while you're actually a sharp Steve. That's the holy grail. You want to look like a Ray, be a Steve, right? So parlays are one of the key ways to do this. We have to first learn how they work. It's not super complicated, but it's worth going over. So a parlay is like a string of bets where each one has to win for the bet to win. You can parlay 2 things together. That could be, the Chiefs to beat the Patriots and Dallas to beat the Giants in one day. That's one NFL Sunday. If the Pats win and Dallas wins, you lose because you bet on, Kansas City to win and Dallas to win. But if Kansas City wins and Dallas wins, you win the whole bet. If Kansas City wins and Dallas loses, you still lose. You have to hit both. If you hit one of 2, it's the same as going 0 of 2 and you lose. So this is how the payouts work of parlay. And we'll stay with 2 legs just to explain it. Leg. That's the other thing. What's a leg? A leg is just one of the bets that's part of a parlay. In the gambling world, a bet, one of the bets in a parlay, each bet's called a leg. So 2 bets would be called a 2-leg parlay, or a double, as our European friends would say. So 2-leg parlay is just 2 bets strung together. Both have to win for you to win the whole thing, and the odds multiply. So let's just say you're parlaying 2 50-50 chances, plus 100, plus 100, right? True coin flips. So what you would do in the implied probability is 50% and 50%. So what you do is you take the percentages and you multiply them together to get the new implied probability. It's the same thing. So 50% times 50% is 0.25%, 25%, right? So you now have a 25% chance to win that parlay, 75% chance to lose. What's a 25% chance in American odds? It's plus 300. So every plus 100 bet, so if you parlay together 2 plus 100 bets, your payout will be plus 300. Now that's the standard parlay math. They don't get funky with it, or there's a subset called single game parlays. I will not touch on that, but basically in a straight parlay, there's no trickery. It's literally just like if you have an edge on one bet and an edge on another and you squish them together, you still are winning, and you're multiplying that edge. Plus 100 becomes plus 300, right? So Parlays are just bets that are strung together that all have to win for you to win the big payout. And that's why it's popular with recreationals, because a lot of people want to like play the lottery, right? A parlay is like a lottery ticket for a recreational bettor. They can bet $5 and string together 18 bets, and then they'll see on the screen it's $5 to win, $300,000, and then they'll get to release that dopamine of, oh, what's it going to be like if I hit this? This is my chance, or whatever. It gives hope. Now, that's not what we're here to do. We're here just to make money, but parlays can be an effective part of making money. So we have to understand them. And if you understand parlays, you can be a little more subtle and not stick out as much to the sports books as a sharp customer. And ultimately, by being a little under the radar, you become an even worse customer for that sports book. That's what we're all about here, being bad customers. So please, take some time to go over the basics behind the parlay math. I'll attach some materials just to help you understand it. And with that, we've kind of covered the basics of sports betting, and we're ready to go to the next module where we actually develop a strategy that's going to take the book's money. You've made it to the good stuff. This is finally where I'm going to teach you how to actually win, right? And the stuff we covered in the first modules, it had to be studied. And if you skipped here, that's fine. Go, you can listen to this one first, but I promise, go back and build that foundation, because learning how to win is going to be built on that foundation. So what is this about? A lot of people are going to tell you, how to arbitrage, how to use an odds screen, that's going to identify bets for you and then you place them. But to be honest, that's not nearly enough to become an actual dangerous sports bettor. And that's not where I want any of us to be. We don't want to have to be reliant on OddsJam or reliant on someone finding bets for us. We want to understand how to find bets for ourselves. That's what this is about. That's the goal of GP Academy. So what I'm going to teach you is I'm going to teach you how to be a trader in the sports betting market, right? You're not just going to be following an odds screen. You're going to be the person synthesizing the information and making decisions. And it might sound a little intimidating, but I promise you it's not as hard as you think. More importantly, it's not as mathematical as you think. Where an arbitrage strategy or like a devigging strategy is going to rely heavily on some basic mathematical formulas, what we're going to be learning is really based on information. I think information is way more important in sports betting than math, and I would venture to guess that most of the biggest sports bettors in the world would agree with me. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to get information from the market and then use it ourselves. And the whole basis for this strategy starts in understanding how the sports betting market actually works. We talked about how a recreational Ray and a sharp Steve see the market differently. A recreational Ray is going to say, oh, I'm betting against Vegas. The market is, kind of this big omnipotent thing that's not, it's kind of mysterious. Whereas a sharp Steve is going to think of a market, break it down to its participants, who's moving the price, who's setting the price, why did that go there, and they're going to try, and the sharp bettors are trying to understand how does this market actually work. And that is the number one thing we need to be asking ourselves, because that information is so much more valuable than anything you get off an odds screen, anything you get from like recommended plays. So let's dive into how you can get that market information, and more importantly, how you can use it to make a lot of money. Okay, the first thing we need to do when trying to understand a market is we need to understand who the market participants actually are. So in the sports betting market, we can first break them up into two camps. There's the sports books and there's the sports bettors, right? So let's focus in on the sports books first, because we're the sports bettors, right? So let's learn a little bit more about our enemy. So I break sports books down into 4 categories: market making, recreational, hybrid, and clone. Now, what do all these mean? These, that's, you're using a lot of lingo. I understand. I'm going to try and de-lingo this as much as possible. So the first category I mentioned, the big dogs, the sharp books, as they're often called. This is the market making slash sharp books. Could be referred to either way. And this is going to be Pinnacle, Circa, BetCris, to some extent Bet Online. And these are sports books whose business model is we're going to take big bets from everybody. We're not going to make a huge average win per bet. So they're, while DraftKings might want to win 7% per bet against a customer, a place like Circa is targeting something, and this is what we call hold in the industry, is just the percent you win. What do you hold? What does the house take home, right? So Circa might be doing 2 to 3% hold against their customers, and DraftKings might be doing 8 or 9%. The way that Circa essentially tries to make money is to increase their volume. So what they're doing is they're going to be taking bets from all comers, and this is why they're called sharp books, because it's kind of, I think it's for two reasons. One, it's because they take bets from sharp customers, and then two, because they take bets from sharp customers, and they have people working there who are really sharp sports bettors themselves. The lines that they put up are often closer to the truth, closer to the true probability than a line at a recreational book that's more, more focused on marketing, like a DraftKings or a BetMGM, and we'll get to them in a second. But these sharp books are very, very important, because even if you can't bet at BetCris or Pinnacle, well, BetCris is also called Bookmaker, but if you can't bet at these offshore books, you still have to know what number they're offering on whatever market you're about to bet. You have to know, because more likely than not, those bookmakers have seen the bets from the biggest and best bettors in the world, and that has informed the prices they offer. So their prices, at a minimum, you have to be aware of before placing bets elsewhere. So, and this is true for all four of those books I mentioned. Plus, you should kind of know where everybody is at just in general. But these are going to be these books are kind of going to be our guides through the jungle, especially when we first start out and we don't have much of a process of our own. We want to follow these books and see what kind of prices they're offering, and then use those probabilities that they're offering to bet elsewhere. Use the line changes that they make to bet elsewhere, right? So those are the sharp books. The recreational books, this is going to be like DraftKings, BetMGM, Bovada for an offshore recreational books. These books, they have a totally different business model, right? They're interested in marketing, giving away promos, attracting a lot of customers, but they're not focused on being incredibly good sports bettors like the sharp books. A lot of the best sports bettors in the world have either worked at sharp books or currently work at sharp books. The same can't really be said for, DraftKings and BetMGM and these other books. They're more interested in spending marketing money, attracting customers, and then winning at a high rate against those customers. So basically, I don't really want to mince words. They're looking for suckers that they can beat easily. They're not really interested in taking bets from really good bettors, because they can't really use that information well enough to better themselves, because they're just not set up, and they're not good enough sports bettors, and they're not set up to move lines around based on sharp information, because they just don't have the talent and the infrastructure to do it. So how they operate is they'll take big bets as long as you're a sucker, but if you're proving to be a bit more skilled and you're winning over the long term, they're gonna kick you out. And that's how they manage their risk. So they want to hold a high percentage. They only want to take bets from recreational rays, as we'll say, and they're going to be very concerned if anybody who seems like they know what they're doing comes through the doors. Sportsbook type 3 is what I like to call the hybrid. And the reality is everybody falls into the hybrid category, kind of, right? Like, there are people at DraftKings who move numbers around, have opinions, and, are willing to take a bet sometimes. Just as, there's times when some of the sharp books don't want to take a bunch of action from one given player. Like realistically, at a sharp book, if you're a losing player, you will get your limits raised. Now there is a floor for everybody, but to think that sharp books take the same exact amount from, suckers and sharps is not true. So the reality, just like everything, is that it's a gray area and everybody falls in the hybrid. But when I'm bucketing these for my purposes, for the purposes of us using these sports books and labeling them with useful labels to help us bet and win money, I do have a category I like to call the hybrid category, which right now in my mind consists mainly of FanDuel and Caesars. So why I like to call them a hybrid, it's mainly based on their betting limits. So they will limit you if you're a winning player, but they will not limit you to such a low number that it's not worth betting. At a standard recreational book like a DraftKings, ESPN Bet, Bet Fanatics, and whatever, they'll limit you to like $2 on a bet. They're basically saying like, get the fuck out, right? Like we can't legally tell you can't play here, but you can't play here. At FanDuel and Caesars, what they'll do is they'll allow you to bet enough to kind of keep you interested. And what they're trying to do, I believe, and FanDuel is very interesting because they actually are one of the only sports books that creates all of their software, trading, and whatnot in-house, right? So they're very unique in that. So I think that FanDuel is paying for information so they can make their internal systems better, because you have to think of them not just as a sports book, but as an odds provider, right? Caesars is, I think, making a play to do kind of the same thing, even though I know that they don't do everything in-house. It's, I think they're trying to kind of differentiate themselves from the other big books like DraftKings, BetMGM, and saying like, we take big bets. We have a lot of VIPs on our Caesars 7-star program from just going to the casinos that we own, that, we want them to be able to come in and play for big amounts on the app, right? So these two books are US books that will take significant bets, even if you're deemed a sharp player, right? Now, by significant, I don't, it could be a couple $100s, but it's just enough to kind of squeeze out a decent hourly, even if you get the limit. And they know this, and they're trying to get your information basically for cheap. They're trying to get sharp information for a lower price than they would have to pay if they let you bet at regular limits. The fourth category is called a clone. Clone is very simple. It's just like they mirror exactly what another sports book lines are. There's a sports book called Lovig, which is a bet online clone. And what they do is they basically take the bet online number and then they just like shave off a cent of juice. So they might go from minus 105 to minus 104, and then they just offer bet online bets, right? Plenty of these. You'll see these more often in the offshore, like illegal sportsbook market, because they don't really have a way to set their lines. Like a Pinnacle or a Circa whatnot has this big odds team. Sometimes these kind of smaller, shadier books are just kind of spun up by a couple people, and they rely on using all of the lines from a certain book to post their lines, and they copy those lines and give them to customers. So when we're talking about a clone, it's important to know like which book could be a clone for, which books are clones for other books, because maybe that will help you, get extra money down. If you want to not move a line, you might go bet into the clone first, then bet into the book it's cloning second, because the clone won't move until the book it copies moves, right? So it is important to know who's cloning who. It's not incredibly important for this lesson, but be aware of the category of clones, because once you see a screen like Spank Odds, you might start to see, oh, they're cloning, this book, and maybe they only clone one or two sports from each book, copy one or two sports from each book, but sometimes it lets you catch a move, or see somebody betting into a Pinnacle clone before they bet into Pinnacle if the clone actually decides to move. All right, now that we know the different kinds of sports books, we have to figure out how do the lines get made? Where do they come from? You log on to DraftKings, you see the Bills are playing the Chiefs, and the Bills are, -3 against the Chiefs. Where does that -3 come from? The way lines are made, they're made three ways. One is by a model. So that would be like you have a couple of inputs, data from the sport, plug it all in, and the model is made to spit out a number saying, whatever it is, the game, the median points scored in the game should be this. The probability of over or under is right there, and then they post that price, right? That's kind of the most basic way. The other is just straight copying. So that's unfortunately what a lot of sportsbooks do, is they wait to see Pinnacle post a number on a game, and then they'll post the exact same name as Pinnacle. They wait for the sharp book, for the market making books to post price, and then they just go and copy it because they don't have any faith in their own handicapping ability, or they don't have the modeling ability required to accurately put something out there. The third way, it's not like officially how prices are made, but the market making books and some of the sharper books, often before they post a market, they offer that market to a select few sharp bettors at pretty attractive bet size. And they let the sharp bettors bet into that market. And this is before it's publicly posted. And then once the sharp bettors have, put in all their orders, they use those bettors' information to inform the first lines they post. And the reason that they do this is they think that it's going to save them money in the long run to form relationships with these sharp bettors, throw them a bone, allow them to, take a crack at the early lines. Then when they roll their market out there, they have a very good idea of where the sharp bettors heads at, so that they're not flying as blind, and they've paid something for that information, but their opening line will be sharper, and they understand a little bit more about where the smart people in the market are leaning, which will help them down the road when moving prices around. So those are the three ways that prices get made. What does this mean for us? Well, I mean, you just have to, these are just opening prices, right? These are just, when it goes from not being posted to being posted. After that, the way prices move around is what we're going to be focusing on. But it's still important to understand that, like, the first price that goes out, these sportsbooks aren't very confident in it. And here's why. Here's how you can tell why. When they put these prices out, now the most confident sportsbook is going to be a sportsbook that does that price discovery process with the sharp bettors before they post the line. And they might come out and post their opener, allowing people to bet 5,000, 10,000 into it. The other end of the spectrum is, you have a model and you have a lot of inputs, and you think it's a good model, and it's shown to be very good by any standard, right? Problem with that is your model is always going to have weaknesses. And there's always going to be human tweaks into models that will make them more predictive, right? So anytime you're just posting your model saying, like, here's this full betting menu, 95% of it could be solid lines, but the 5% that are not, the sharp bettors are going to sniff them out and hammer them. So instead of just rolling out your model and saying everybody bet 10,000, what these books will do is that, if they're using a model to set their openers, or if they're using something that's a little more subjective, but still like putting a price out that they're not super behind, they'll often say, hey, you can bet 500 on this. And they'll see if any like accounts that they think are kind of sharp bet into the opening number, and then they'll move it, right? And we're going to talk about how these sports books move lines more into depth later. But what you do need to know is, like, how are these books pricing their openers? And it dispels kind of one of the main myths, which is like the sportsbook openers, right? Vegas knew when they posted at -3, and then it went to -5. So the +5 must be good, because when Vegas set the line, at -3, they would definitely that's the more accurate line. Whatever Vegas first posts is right. And if it goes too far, well, bet what Vegas initially bet. That will lose you money, I promise. And we'll talk more about line movement later. But the key takeaway here is that the opening numbers are not very strong. And the reason for that is the sportsbooks don't have as much information as they will later have in the week when they post the openers. So they're just trying to get numbers out there and then moving them around. The getting numbers out is less important than moving it around. There's a great quote. I think I heard it on Spanky's podcast that said, if you had to, have one skill, making a great number or being able to quickly move that number to the closing line, the better skill for bookmakers to be able to quickly move the opener to the closing line as fast as possible. So whatever the market's going to close at, if you can get your number to that number faster than the other sports books, you're going to do well in the business, right? So in the next segment, we're going to talk about moving numbers, which is far more important. Okay, so we talked about how do sportsbooks make their lines. Now let's talk about how they move them around. And you might think, oh, this is the same thing, or essentially the same thing. And it's not, because most likely the same team doesn't even handle each of these duties. There's going to be the origination team, the modeling team, maybe what you would call possibly the data science team. That is going to be building the models to create the opening lines. And this will be at books that don't just copy from Pinnacle, right? And then you have the risk team, which is going to be like the traders who are moving around the lines based on the information they have coming in, what they think, is the best number based on that information, and managing the risk of the sports book. So these are two separate functions, and it's important to realize that, right? And the risk function and the trading function is far more important to these sports books, because this is where they're going to A, protect themselves from absolutely blowing up, and B, they're going to be able to use the information, their proprietary information, which is information from sharp bettors. That's information that not necessarily, like, I will not see, that you will not see, but they will see, sharp account A has bet XYZ. And that's proprietary information that's really valuable. And the trading and the risk team, that's the team that uses that to make them more money. And what we are going to do is we're going to watch them, and then we're going to see what we think the information they're getting is, what they've seen. We're going to infer that, and then we're going to go and use that information to bet at other books and make a lot of money, right? So this right here, the moving of the number, this is where all the magic happens for both the books and the bettors, right? So there's a few things to cover, but first we're going to cover how a number moves. There's a common misconception in gambling that the house just wants to balance equal amounts of money on both sides of the bet, and they're just going to collect the juice and they're happy, right? They don't have to risk anything. They're going to get $1,000 on the Pistons, $1,000 on the Pacers, and they're going to pay whoever wins $900 or $1,900. They're going to keep $100. And that's, and that's their model. And I think people assume that because honestly, it's like for many people who aren't naturally in a risk-taking profession, it seems like the only way to do business, because you'd be scared to have any exposure otherwise, right? So to everybody, they're going to assume that Vegas or the sportsbook's trying to balance action on both sides. That's not actually the case. On almost every single sporting event, a sportsbook's going to have one side they want to win more than another side, right? So in the business, when we talk about a sportsbook moving their number, we often say they're either moving it on action or they're moving it on air. So what on action means is they've gone and bet in, and they've analyzed that bet and decided based on the information in that bet, you know what? We actually don't think it should be -9. We think it should be -9.5. They move the number from -9 to -9.5, and then, see if they're going to take any bets there. That's easy to understand, right? It's like, okay, you take a bet, you're like, ooh, okay, that person might know something. I'm actually, and the other thing is, let's remember, like, if a bet goes from -9 to -9.5, that means they're probably betting on the -9, not the +9, right? So like what that means is they've seen someone who's smart come in. This is the sports book, they being the sports book, and they see them bet -9. And they go, well, you know what? If they think -9 is a good price, maybe we got to move it to -9.5 or -10. Because if they think -9 is a good price, the true price might be -10. So let's move the line. I respect them. I see their information. I'm going to move the line from -9 to -10, or maybe if you want to kind of make a smaller move, -9 to -9.5. That's moving on action. That's just moving on a bet. Now, moving on air is really interesting. So moving on air is only happens when one book is just copying another book. And a lot of the recreational books will do this. And this is where you can really sometimes take advantage of them. So moving on air would be, let's say that a book decides in basketball, we're going to copy Pinnacle's numbers. We don't know enough about basketball. We've kind of kicked our sharp customers out, or we don't know which new accounts belong to our sharp customers. So what we're going to do is, we know Pinnacle takes action from sharp customers. We know they, are very good at basketball. So we're going to just copy every Pinnacle number for basketball, right? We're going to try to, but they don't have it like automatically plugged in. You have a trader who's kind of moving it around. It might be a little slow. So here's what happens. What happens if Pinnacle doesn't move first? Well, then the book that's moving on air might not move their number until someone goes, bets into Pinnacle, and then that number moves. So Pinnacle gets moved, and maybe DraftKings didn't even take a bet at -9, but they see Pinnacle go from -9 to -9.5. DraftKings never took a -9 bet, but they'll still move from -9 to -9.5 because they are not confident in their ability to price, and they believe that Pinnacle is better at it. And they're probably right. And that's actually like I'm not even saying this is a stupid or like bad thing to do. It's just not their business model. Their business model is not to be sharp. So what they'll often do is they'll just follow along the sharp books all across the market all day. They just watch them and follow along, and try not to get too hurt. The thing is that since they don't have the actual information Pinnacle's moving on, they're less knowledgeable overall than Pinnacle. So they're not always going to be as quick to the close as the market making books. For us as bettors, we're going to be basically doing the same thing the recreational books are doing, and we're going to try and follow the sharp books along. But we have to understand what we're really doing when we follow the sharp books, because the sharp book is really just a representation after the line is set of all of the information they're getting from sharp bettors and the bets that they're seeing and nobody else is seeing. So what we're really doing when we're following the sharp books is we're following the sharp bettors. And this is important because we're going to look for ways to find what the sharp bettors are doing before the sharp books even get that information. And even though that this could just be a 30-second lag, the difference is that you're going to be able to have that much more time to get to a book like DraftKings, FanDuel, Caesars before the bet from the sharp bettors even gets hit at circa Pinnacle bookmaker. And that's where we're really going to start to make money, when we can give ourselves a little extra time to get the bets down, because in this game, time is everything. Time is everything. And seconds matter, right? So what we're going to do now is we're going to be detectives, and we're going to try and figure out what the sharp bettors are saying, what the sharp books are telling us the sharp bettors are saying, right? And once we figure that out, we can find situations at, some more recreational books, or some of the hybrid books, or even some of the sharp books who might not have moved yet, where we can get a good number that we can tell sharp bettors like through their betting at other sites. All right, so you might be wondering, how do I know what all these different sports books prices are? I can't be opening up, 80 different tabs on my browser and watching, each sportsbook move and referencing and finding the same line. And you're right, you can't do that. To do this, you need some type of what we call an odds screen. What an odds screen is it's just a real-time feed of the prices for each game at different sportsbooks. So what you'll see in a row on an odds screen is a game. Let's say it's Chiefs versus Dolphins. You'll see Chiefs versus Dolphins. And each column on an odds screen, set up like a grid, like an Excel sheet, is a different sports book, and it'll show Circa, Chiefs -8, Pinnacle, Chiefs -8, DraftKings, Chiefs -7.5. Oh, interesting. It's a different price. And that's exactly why you need one of these, because it immediately alerts you of where the different prices are in the market. And that's what's great about sports betting is sports betting, it's not all centralized into one exchange. In sports betting, there's basically like 100 bucket shops that each have their own slight difference in prices, and each might be lagging behind in information, and they might some might not know what they're doing in one sport, and some might not know what they're doing in another sport. And there's all this opportunity that's created because of the setup of the market, which is disjointed sports books that don't offer the same price at all times. But the only way to take advantage of this is to be able to see all of that information on one screen. So you need an odds screen, and what I'm going to suggest is Spank Odds. I like Spank Odds mainly because it shows the most real-time information. You could use Don Best as well for this, but it's real-time information. You get to peg the opening lines, which we'll talk about why that's important later. And it shows the line movement, and it lets you set up custom alerts for different sports or whatever it is. They have golf, which is very important to me. But to do this strategy properly, you're going to need to invest in an odds screen. There's just no way around it. But the good thing is, on a per month basis, what you'll make with an odds screen will more than make up for how much it costs. So I would highly suggest it. I'm going to show some examples later of like how to use them, what it all looks like. But what you need to know right now is an odds screen just shows you the different prices at each sports book for a single event, right? And how to easily and quickly compare them. The quickly compare is important. Like we said before, this is a game of speed. So we need to be doing, getting seconds faster. Anything that can make us seconds faster in this game is going to pay off huge. So the odds screen is certainly a necessary step in that, and being fast and being accurate with your betting and with your market information, that is key. So getting an odds screen is going to be able to tell you with a high degree of accuracy and speed what sharp bettors and sharp books are thinking about the market, and you're going to see their opinions played out on the odds screen in terms of price moves, right? Price moves and limit changes are going to be key. So you need an odds screen that's going to give you that information, give it to you fast, and allow you to use it to quickly go bet somewhere else before the good price goes away. Our goal in being a sports market trader is we're trying to figure out, what do the smart people know? Because this is what's happening. And let's get back to the different market participants. We have the sports books and we have the sports bettors. Now we're going to shift our focus over to the sports bettors. They come in a couple of varieties. You have the recreational bettors, and that's going to be like your uncle who at Thanksgiving talks about how you have to buy the points and always kick the field goal to give it points on the board, and talks about trends and narratives, right? These customers are the customers the sportsbooks want, but also the customers whose information the sportsbooks don't care about. So you have this huge bucket, and this is going to be like 90% of customers fall into this bucket of just total recreationals. They bet based off what they see on ESPN, what they, remember from the last time these teams played. They bet on trends, narratives, etc. Then you have a very, very small, very, 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 very small group That's on the other end of the spectrum. And these are the originators. What these are basically people who build their own models, watch, sports, or experts in certain sports. They watch the sports, they follow the injury trends, they listen to the coach's press conference. They have a variety of different models to model the different markets in that sport. They have both extreme domain knowledge, and they have the quantitative skills to be able to use their domain knowledge, use the data that's available, get data that might not be widely available, and combine that into a price, into a trade, and they're going to go better at the sports books and generally be more knowledgeable than the sports books in the sports that they specialize in the markets they specialize in. That's a tiny fraction of the population. So let's call that 1%. It's much less. What's the other 9%? The other 9% are going to be the people who are trying to kind of win against the sports book, but might not be doing it in the same way as the originators. These could be people who are just using bonuses and boosts to find plus EV bets, who are using odds jam and arbitraging, who are using odds jam and plus EV betting, which is just kind of devigging, and then who are doing kind of what we're doing, which is more referred to as steam chasing. So there's this group, there's the big group of recreationals, the tiny sliver of people who could actually beat the books with their own mind or whatever, and then the rest of the people who are following around the books, and that tiny sliver of bettors who the books are, in a sense, following themselves. So it's kind of like this game of telephone, right? It's like that sliver of the top bettors tell the books their information. The recreational books don't understand that they're getting good information, so they don't do anything. But the sharp books will then tell that 9% who's kind of like following around, doing the arbitrage and putting themselves, between maybe the sharp books and the recreational books. And then you have the vast majority of the market who's doing nothing with this information, right? So you have to remember there is a pecking order in terms of who is, the sharpest or who knows the most. It's going to be at the very, very top. You have the best sports bettors in the world who are making their own numbers. They're getting their information paid for, stolen, whatever, by various people who they might be using to make bets through, and the sharp books. Then the information that they are giving the sharp books and other market participants is getting shown in the odds screen. And if we can get that information and use it at the recreational books before they move their number, that's going to be the bread and butter of this trading strategy, right? So what we're looking for is the information from that top bucket of bettors, and we're looking to figure out what it is, and then quickly use that information to bet elsewhere before the whole entire market adjusts and prices in that information. To understand where the sharp bettors are, what they think are the good plays, what they think are the good numbers, we have to first put ourselves in the shoes of the sports books, and specifically of the market making sports book. These are the sports books that are going to see the sharp bettors' actions and then make a determination on if they want to move their number or not. So let's walk through a very basic scenario to show the difference in what happens when a sharp customer and a square customer bets into a market making sports book like Circus Sports. We'll give Circus Sports a shout out. It's the only legal US sharp sports book currently operating. Yeah, we'll play into them in this example, or we'll at least use their information. So what you have is we're gonna have a situation where two people are gonna bet their max limit into Circus. So let's go back and talk about a football game. I think we're using like Chiefs Dolphins. Let's just say we got Chiefs -7 against the Dolphins, and you have two bets come into Circa. So we have Jeff Benson there at Circa in the risk room, and they see two $10,000 bets come in, which is the max limit for just anybody walking off the street and placing a bet at the time. I'm not saying that's always what their max limit is. In this situation, we're assuming it's the max, right? Because a max bet is usually what it takes to move a line, not always, but max bet more often than not is going to be either sharp or from just a massive recreational whale. So we see two bets, or Jeff sees two bets come in to Circa, and he looks at them. One is from someone that he knows is a casino VIP. They play a lot of blackjack, they stay at the pool, they, like to gamble it up a little bit, and they're just some rich executive who has tens of millions of dollars, and the $10,000 bet to them is just, in his opinion, them wanting to watch a game, and it's a recreational bet. It's Chiefs. They bet it at Chiefs -7, and they're like, okay, they just, whatever. They're from Kansas City. That's Patrick Mahomes' old baseball coach or something. Whatever the reason is, they just want to place that bet because they want to root for the Chiefs and watch them win the game. And Jeff's doesn't think particularly highly of their handicapping action. Bet number 2 comes in. Jeff's like, wow, that's, so-and-so, that's Sharp Steve. Steve is beating us because he has a record. The sportsbooks keep a record of your bets. How often are you getting a better number than the number that the bet closes at when the game goes off? Closing line value. How often are you winning against us? What are you holding against us? Any anecdotal, evidence? Has so-and-so said that person's sharp or something? You're always trying to get whatever information you can. These sportsbooks certainly are trying to figure out which of their customers are sharp. So Jeff looks at his sheet. Sharp Steve. He's beating us, by 5% a bet. He always gets closing line value, and he's betting Chiefs -7. The first person who bet, recreational Ray from Kansas City, just kind of, he was a gambler just betting on the game. Jeff just floats that bet through, and it's like, okay, whatever. It's still -7. Great. Ray made a bet. Let's send him a buffet comp. Case closed. Same bet, $10,000. Chiefs -7. These are the exact same bets, which actually have the exact same value, but for the sportsbook, they have different value because of information. Sharp Steve comes in, -7, Kansas City Chiefs. Jeff's like, whoa. Wait, hold on. Steve's been killing us this year. He always gets the best number. He's, holding 6% against us. I know he's a nit. He only bets when he thinks he gets the best bet, or I know he's a professional gambler. So he would never bet unless he thought that this bet had value. So Steve probably thinks that the Chiefs should be like -9 to make this bet. So on that same number, in that same amount, different person, Jeff and the Circa team, they see that and they decide, okay, you know what? Steve knows what they're talking about. I'm gonna move this I'm gonna take the bet because you gotta take the bet, right? That's the first thing. That's how they operate. They're gonna they post a limit and they honor it, right? So the bet's taken when Jeff's reviewing it, but he sees it come in, and now that we take it, I don't know, -7 might not be the right number. Steve certainly doesn't think so. That's a pro. He wouldn't be betting -7 unless he thought that bet would have long-term value. So maybe we take the bet and we move the line to -8, and we see what happens. We see, do other pros come in and start betting +8 on the Dolphins or not? That's kind of what they're trying to figure out. Once they bump it from -7 to -8, they want to see if there's some action that starts coming on the other side, right? So this is an example of how sportsbooks are viewing their customer. Now, what does this tell us? Well, it tells us, when Circa moves that number, that they've had a bet from someone like Sharp Steve. They've had a bet from somebody that they trust enough and they think highly enough to move their number, to say we were wrong. And they're good bettors. So that's why this is such a compliment, because the people who work at Sharp Sportsbooks, they're incredibly talented individuals who understand these markets, who understand these sports, and who would probably be able to go out and be winning bettors on their own. So to say, hey, I think we might have got that wrong. Now we're seeing what Steve's saying, we think really, really highly of him, and they're moving their number. Now I'm interested because they know what they're talking about, and they think that this person knows even more about what he's talking about, right? So we're seeing, and what we're trying to find out is when those sharp books, or when any sports book has been alerted to that really good information from bettors like Sharp Steve betting -1, -7. And it's important to understand the difference in how a sports book, a market making book, will treat a customer like a recreational Ray and a Sharp Steve. Even if they do the exact same thing, the sports book's going to react differently. In that example, where we talked about Circa and recreational Ray and Sharp Steve betting into them, and them deciding to move the number from -7 to -8 based on Sharp Steve's information, that's one of the ways that we can be tipped off of sharp information is alignment, right? And this is the easiest to understand. This is where we're going to make the majority of our bets, because there's going to be line moves happening all the time, right? So what you're going to be doing is you're going to be trying to track these different markets, look at the odds screen, right? And wait to see, oh, here comes in a line move. Now, line move, there's different levels of conviction within seeing a line move, right? So there's oftentimes, like if you put yourself in the shoes of Sharp Steve, and the reality is we have to remember who these Sharp Steves are. Because Sharp Steve isn't just a guy walking into Circuit Sports. Sharp Steve is someone sitting behind a computer who has access to accounts at every sports book imaginable, maybe multiple accounts at certain sports books, or is giving information to multiple people who are paying him for that information, and is trying to get down as much money as they can on a good number. So they're not trying to move their number out of the way. So everything that they're going to do is going to be designed to bet as much as they can at the best number without moving other numbers. So they're going to try and be able to bet at multiple sports books at the number before they move. And they know that all these sports books are copying the Sharp books. They're copying Circa. They're copying Pinnacle, right? So they're going to be afraid to hit, and this is called like hitting the screen. They're going to be afraid to hit Bet Online, Circa, Pinnacle, Bookmaker, until they've satisfied enough of their orders through sports books or outs, as you'll call them. Places to bet is an out that might not show up on the screen. It could be a local bookie. It could be, they could be working with somebody who has a VIP account at a DraftKings or a Caesars or BetMGM, right? There's creative ways to place bets without necessarily showing the information on the screen. So once the information gets to Pinnacle, gets to Bookmaker, right? A lot of the times they've kind of worked through the back channels. Here's the other thing, though, is they're often giving this information to people who might be a little greedy and bet it on them. This is the biggest problem that these massive operations have, is leakage, information leakage. So that person who has the VIP DraftKings account, they might say, yeah, we'll place the bets for you. Yeah, sure. But why do they have a VIP DraftKings account? Probably because they've done a ton of DGen gambling, right? So they might get that bet, place it, but they're also betting it, at other places, and the information's immediately hitting the screen at some offshore books and whatnot. So the practice and the reality is different. The practice is they want to get down as much volume as they can without it ever flashing up on an odds screen. The reality is that's not often doable, because either people who work at the sports books are going to see their bets, place them themselves, their runners or their partners are going to place bets for themselves, get greedy, right? So what you have to do is you're basically waiting to see the leakage of information from these sharp bettors, which instead of being like a Sharp Steve, it's more of like, it's a business. It's a business. There's multiple people involved, right? It's not just one person. So, they're called syndicates. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to figure out which way and what number the syndicate's like in a certain game and play it at any site that it's available, right? So to do this, you have to be plugged in, you have to be at the odds screen, and you have to be there while the market suddenly starts to see the information and change. Because what's going to happen is they're trying to keep it hidden. But once it starts to pop up in public, it's suddenly going to move everywhere within a minute, half a minute, and whatever. So your angle is you see that information pop up onto the market, and then you use it quickly. So usually that's the line, right? However, there is another way where you can see that maybe a sharp book has some information, and they have a lean, and it's called like having an opinion. So if a sharp book is different than the rest of the market, and they stay different, so it's not like, oh, they move a number, move it back. It's like they've always been half a point off. They've been at 7.5 instead of 7 on the Chiefs Dolphins since it opened, right? They've always been at 7.5. All the other books have stayed at 7. We would say, let's say it's Pinnacle 7.5. Then you have Bookmaker, Circa, Bet Online, and a lot of the offshores are at 7. You would say Pinnacle has an opinion, and their opinion is very pro Chiefs. So we're saying Chiefs, -7, Dolphins +7, Pinnacle's Chiefs -7.5, Dolphins +7.5. Why is that having an opinion, and what are they trying to do? Well, look, a lot of the market participants are using odds screens, and they're price sensitive. So if they like the Dolphins, they want to get the best price on the Dolphins, right? And since that there's so many services that allow the bettor to compare books to other books, what Pinnacle is doing is they're saying, hey, like, you want to bet the Dolphins, bet them with us. And what that says to me is, hey, we really like the Chiefs. We really like the Chiefs because we're kind of like giving an extra bonus to try and get people to come bet the Dolphins with us, get people to bet the Dolphins with us, right? And that's another way that a book can tip that they might have some information, or they feel very strongly about establishing a position on the Chiefs there. And again, I don't know, like, are they historically very good when they take a position in an NFL spread? I don't know. I actually don't know. It's not my market. But that's something you should be tracking, and you should be trying to figure out, A, do any of these books seem to have an opinion? And B, where is the market moving, and is it moving in one direction? Is it moving all at once? Is it maybe one book flipping back and forth? And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But what's important to know is there's a few ways that the market can tip off that a market participant, like a book, can tip off that they have some good information. One is moving their number. So just a line change, very basic. 2 is being consistently different on a certain line, which is we call having an opinion. So those are the 2 main ways that a market participant sportsbook is tipping their hand that they have some good information, feel very strongly about a certain side or a certain number. Okay, so now we know how these sharp books think, how they react to their different types of customers, and ultimately, how are they going to tip their hand as to the very valuable information that they have from their really smart customers, right? That's what we're looking for. So how do we find it? How do we set ourselves up to be in the best position to find this information, right? How do we set our odds screen up? So remember, we talked, and we're going to need to have an odds screen for this, but it's not enough to just have an odds screen, right? There's many ways to set it up. What are the important pieces of information that we need to have to eventually find slam dunk bets that we're going to be comfortable placing ourselves? Your odds screen needs to be set up so you can tell a few different things. You want to know the opening line, right, at the sharp books. So you want to know the opening line at a few different sharp books. I have my odds screen set up to show opening line at Pinnacle, opening line at Bookmaker, Circa, and Bet Online. And what I have is I have one column that's gray, shows the opening line. The next column next to them is their current line. So it's very easy for me to look and see how they've moved. Has it been in one direction or another direction, right? And that's very important because ultimately it's not enough to know the current price of the market. It's more important to know how it got there. And I'll walk through an example of why this is, but I want to go over the information that you do need to see on your odds screen to, first of all, be able to gather that information so we can use it later to bet. So you want to know the opening number for the sharp books, and you want to know the current number for the sharp books. So that's 8 columns. In the middle, you want to have your recreational books. And those are going to be the recreational books that you can bet on. you're not using these as much for information. The sharp books, you don't have to bet on them. You probably, as for this lesson, what we're going over in this course, this isn't going to be for betting on the sharp books. This is for betting on the recreational books and the hybrid books. So in the middle, I want you to have DraftKings, FanDuel, MGM, Caesars, Bet Rivers, Bovada, whatever books you have access to, right? Whichever sports books you have access to that aren't the sharp books. And then next to them, there's a few offshore books you want to have. Now this is actually, there's a lot more of these, and a lot of them, what they do is they copy a couple of the main books and they'll move just slightly before them or just slightly after them. But a lot of times you'll see them move before you'll see Circa or Pinnacle or Bookmaker move. So what you kind of want to do is be able to see the books that are giving you information, and then in the middle you have the books where you're going to apply that, where you're going to pick them off, right? So you're kind of working with the sharp books and the offshores, and you're using that information, you're betting at your hybrid and your recreational books. So you need to see openers and then the current market. And when you hover over a bet, you also want to be able to see and click on it. And this is, I use Spank Odds, but this is a very important aspect of it. You see a ladder of all the different prices and the moves, and very important, what the limit is. How much can you bet there? So in very simple terms, let's say that at 259, Circa is taking $5,000 bets on a basketball game, on a college basketball game. And at 3, they raise the limit to $10,000. If they raise the limit at 3 every day, again, not saying this is the case, but let's just say they have a preset time where they just raise the limits because maybe lineups come out, or, usually some of their better customers who, some of their sharper customers bet before then, they raise the limit. After the limit's raised, there's often going to be really sharp originators waiting for the limits to be raised because they want to bet more money. They have a big bankroll. They know they have an edge. And instead of betting at a lower number and having it move away from them, they'll wait until the limits increase and then they'll bet. So if you see a move after a limit increase, that's going to hold a lot more weight, or it's going to hold more weight than a number that moves before a limit increase. So that's why we're looking at, and if you hover over any sports book on the screen, you'll be able to see, at least at Spank Odds, what are the limits and the pricing history with the limits attached. So you'll see, okay, at 5,000, it stayed at -7, -7, -7. And then the limits went to 10,000 and went -7 to -8. That's interesting. What was happening? That's kind of the situation, at least what I see there is the situation I just mentioned, where an originator of the big bankroll is waiting for the limits to increase before placing a bet because they want to get a larger size bet down and they don't want to move the number away from themselves before the limits go up, right? So if I see that, I think, oh, that makes sense. That makes sense what's happening. I'm going to trust that bettor was waiting for that -7. So now I see the -7 at DraftKings. That's an easy bet for me, right? So this is all the different, you can call it steam chasing, right? But what you're doing is you're just trying to figure out what's going on, right? And you're using anything you can, all of the different information. It could be limit sizes, numbers, openers, whatever. And all of that's getting synthesized into you just trying to make good bets and make good decisions. So you want to set your odds screen up so you can see the opener, see where it's been moving towards, and then you want to be able to see quickly the different, you want to bucket your books into the different sections so you understand what you're looking at each side of your odds screen. And then you want to be able to quickly be able to scan a bet and look at the history, see the limits, see the line movement. And we're going to use that information. We'll talk about exactly how we're going to use that in the next video. All right, we have our screen set up. We know what information that we're looking for, which is going to be opener, current price of the sharp books, current price of the offshores, and then right in the middle, that's our prey, the rec books. the hybrid books, the books that might be a little bit slow to react to this information, that we're going to be able to sniff out faster than that. So now let's talk about how we go about, and you know what? The first thing that honestly we should do, and I want to achieve with this course, is not just teach you a way to find pretty good bets. I want to teach you a way to find slam dunk bets. And this doesn't mean bets that are going to win all the time, but this means bets that have the highest certainty of being a good bet, of being profitable, because the implied probability behind a bet is unknown. You know, we're the best sports bettors are just trying to guess the probability a little bit better than everybody else. So ultimately, you'll never know if a bet is a good bet or a bad bet. Here, what we're going to do though, the most important thing you can do, and this goes for when you go past this in betting, to originating, to, you know, whatever else you want to do, is to up the likelihood that the bet you're making is profitable. Because if you conservatively manage your bankroll and bet mostly profitable bets, you'll win in the long term. The worst thing you can do is be betting bets you think are profitable that aren't profitable. That will cause you to go broke. Or be betting too much on bets because you think they're more profitable than they are. So what we're doing is we're going to try and decrease the likelihood that what we have is a bad bet by as much as possible, and we're going to start there and then build from there, right? So you want to start and find the slam dunks. After that, you can kind of branch out and, you know, do some things that might be a little more iffy or might require a little more subjectivity. But right now we're going out, we're hunting for slam dunk bets. So what's a slam dunk bet? In my opinion, a slam dunk bet has 3 features. Feature number 1, the price has only moved in one direction, or it's only moved in one direction since a limit increase. And this is at the sharp book, right? If the price goes up and down at a recreational book, I'm not buying into that. I'm talking about what's the price doing at Circa, at Bookmaker, at Pinnacle. Who's the last one I'm forgetting? Bet Online. Again, they are a sharp book, but they're a little different. What's the price doing there? So when I mean one direction, here's what I mean. Let's say that you have the same thing. We got the Dolphins versus the Chiefs. The Chiefs are -7, right? And we see, you know, they post, and by they I mean everybody, and they all post Chiefs -7, right? Chiefs -7, Dolphins +7, and all of them posted at -110, -110. Sharp books will often have lower juice, so it's not going to be -110 there a lot, but for the simplicity, everybody has -110, -110. Now we see Chiefs go -7, -112. Interesting. Okay, so someone's buying the Chiefs there, right? And then we see it go -1, you know, -7, -114. Oh, very interesting. Now I'm becoming really, really interested. And maybe you see that -114 go up. You see it go -110 to -12 at Circa, and the -114 happened at Pinnacle. And at Bookmaker, you suddenly see it go -110 to you know, maybe it goes -7.5, -110. Now it's all telling the same story. It's telling the story of someone's betting on the Chiefs at -1.7, -110. That's the story. And there isn't any action on the Dolphins at +7, -110. So right there, what I'm seeing is all of the action is in the same direction. It's in that Chiefs -1.7 direction. You might be asking, like, you know, how often does this happen? And it is rare. It is rare. And that's why this is about slam dunk bets. And this is where we start. We start with our biggest, most likely good bets, you know, and you'll branch out, but most bets won't fulfill this criteria, right? But what you want to be looking for is that movement all in the same direction. And when I say either at the open or after a limit change, I say the limit change because what we talked about before, if there's a big limit change, and after that limit change, you start to see all the movement kind of go in one direction. What I'm seeing, because this isn't a formula of math. This is a formula of market participants and psychology and just basic economics, where if you have a big bankroll and you have an opinion on this Chiefs game, you're not going to bet it on Tuesday for 5,000, right? You might. I mean, if you really don't think the information is going to get out, but information gets out. So you might be waiting. till the limits go up on Friday, on Saturday, you know. And once the limits go up to a point where you think, okay, now I can get down as much money as I want, you know, say you want to bet 100,000, 150,000 across sports books on this game, that's not going to happen really early in the week. So you wait and you monitor, you see when's the limits, you know, when has the limit changed. And once the limits pick up across different books, then you might hop in and strike, right? In that situation, I'm seeing the same story. Like someone is very, very confident who knows something that this is a good number. Now, they could also bet 150,000 and the number doesn't move. Let's remember why the number moves, because the sports books respect that action, right? So this is somebody who the sports books respect, who's also waited until the limits have gone up. Most likely that means that they're just in a vacuum with better, because they have a bigger bankroll. You win money in sports betting through being a good bettor. So if you've made a lot of money and you're a bettor, it's likely that you're a very good one. So alarm bells go off when I see the limit increase and then something start moving in a direction, in just one direction. I'm like, someone was waiting and someone's pouncing and they're smart, right? So, you know, maybe it kicked back and forth before the limit increase, but that big player wasn't there. They weren't there because even if it went, you know, -7 to -6.5, the number wasn't very good. And they say, I mean, that's a key number in football, and I'm actually not a football bettor, so I'm gonna get skewered if I talk about -6.5 versus -7. So like, let's just assume it's not football, or just stay with me and pretend key numbers don't exist. But you know, if it went -1.7, like -105, then they might not have bet, even though it's a good price, and even though it's a better price than they knew they were going to get later. Because at, you know, -1, you know, -7, -105, they could only get down like 30 grand. Whereas if they get down, you know, $150,000 at -7, -110, that's a better deal for them financially, right? So they're not going to take that slight price improvement. And the reason it might be flipping back and forth before they get there is because they're not involved. They're not tipping their hand yet. But once they do get involved, the price starts going in the same direction. Now I'm really interested, right? And that's usually after a limit increase. So there's, in my mind, there's kind of a small reset when limits go up at books, right? The other reason is whatever the bet before the limit increase is also very interesting, because if a number goes one direction into a limit increase, there's a high likelihood that the book now feels confident. They've gotten that bet from someone they believe to be a great customer or a great sports bettor. They get that information, they move the number, and now they feel confident to raise it. So I'm also always looking at the bet before a limit increase, right? So if a move goes into a limit increase and then continues after too, that's even juicier. But the key here, the key to number one of a slam dunk bet is knowing the direction the line's moving. And the more confident you are, or the more confident you'll be in your bet, is the less opposition that line move has. Less opposition. So if it's all in one direction, then that's the start to a really good bet. So consistent line movement is number one. That's step one. Step two is if the bet's been tipped offshore before being tipped onshore. Here's why. The offshores will oftentimes move on air and move on action, right? So you're going to have a situation where a bettor might be wanting to bet across a dozen sports books, 2 dozen, and they're going to be hitting the offshores first, because they know if they hit the sharp books, Circa, Pinnacle, whatever, the offshores might move. And if they do hit them first, it is more likely to be a setup, a fake. And this is, I don't love talking too much about fakes, because I think people overestimate how many times like people are faking the market. It has to be a very good value proposition for it to be worth it for someone to fake, and that's only going to be accomplished by the biggest syndicates. And it certainly happens. What a fake is a bettor knows they can move a number basically using books that move on air, right? So they know they can bet Pinnacle, move it from, you know, +7 to +7.5, and then they can move it with 5,000, and then somewhere else, because they have a lot of outs, they can get down tons of money on plus 7.5 because that's the side they actually want to be on. So that's just the economics of fake. It requires books to move on air and to follow along these sharp books. And it's certainly a tool in the toolbox of the best bettors in the industry, but it's not something that you have to be incredibly scared about or paranoid about, right? Usually a line move is just a line move, but if you see something where all the offshores start getting hit, right? All the offshores start getting hit, and then you see Circa get hit, Pinnacle get hit. What I'm seeing there is, it's a consolidated move, right? You have people trying to get down on the non-Chris, non-Pinnacle books, and whatever books are on Spank Odds, there's plenty of other outs that these people are getting down at even before this action gets to Spank Odds. But what they'll be doing is, okay, you get anything off screen you can, then you get kind of the offshores, then you start to move towards the sharp books and get the last of your action at the sharp books. The reason I like to see that coordinated move is because it tells the story of, like, logically how a big better would be better. Is they want to get down as much as possible away from everybody's eyeballs. And there's a pecking order from 0 eyeballs, like local bookie who's not going to show up on Spank Odds, to like Pinnacle, who everybody's tapped into for their like devigging and API, like their automated betting tools, right? There's a hierarchy, right? And once it hits Pinnacle, everybody's algos will tip off other bets or whatever. You'll get triggers and kind of quickly move over to bet on DraftKings and MGM and whatever. We want to know before it hits Pinnacle, before everybody's automated tools get ticked off. So if you're watching the screen, you want to see the bets move from the offshores to the sharps. And when you see that move, kind of the offshores start hitting and then maybe a sharp book move, you feel confident enough, especially if this line move has only happened in one direction, to go and hit it on your recreational books or your hybrid books, DraftKings, FanDuel, and whatever. So you want to see a concentrated move. Steam chasing isn't just one book moves and you go. If you just see Pinnacle move and nothing else moves, I don't see that as a slam dunk bet. That could be for plenty of reasons, and not all of them are indicating like that's a move you need to be following. When we're looking for slam dunk bets, we want to see one direction, big moves, really an amount of money to cause that move that wouldn't be reasonable to be a fake, right? So big move, one direction. The third thing of a slam dunk bet, which we've touched on, is that the book that you're betting at is a notorious slow mover. Now, you might be like, oh, any of the rec books and any of the hybrid books are notorious slow movers, but that's not necessarily true. Caesars is actually very sensitive to price moves from other books, at least as of right now. FanDuel to a lesser extent. So if at Caesars, I'd be double checking. Caesars, you really want to feel confident that you're beating them to a move, because it's possible that they're moving off of not like Pinnacle. They might be moving off some offshore action, or someone else staring at, a trader at Caesars staring at the same screen as you. Notoriously slow books are like Bet Rivers, Bet MGM, DraftKings. FanDuel's kind of in the middle, but they're pretty slow. And you want to watch the market to see, oh, okay, so they're just slow. They don't have an opinion. Now, we know they don't really have an opinion, but again, this is more just dissuading you from trying to chase steam at like Circa. Certainly can do it. I'm not an expert. This isn't how I make my bread and butter anymore. So maybe there are sharp books that are a little slow, but what I'm talking about, again, slam dunk, you got to move going one direction. It's a big move, and you're betting against a slow book. It's just like checks all 3 boxes, slam dunk bet. We know that we're getting good value. Okay, so now we know what we're looking for. We know we want a slam dunk bet, right? We know the requirements. We know how to find it. So what do we need to do? What do we pack in the backpack to go out hunting and go find these bets? So obviously the first thing is a well set up odds screen, right? That's going to be your guide through the jump. Well, the guide, actually, I like to think of my guides in this circumstance as the sharp books who are telling me little bits of information about what sharp bettors are doing, right? But the odds screen is like your map, and your tools are going to be your money and your accounts, right? So you want to make sure that you have an account at every square book, every recreational book that you can. So that's going to be, Caesars, MGM, DraftKings, BetRivers, PointsBet, whatever it is. The reason you want all that you can is because you're going to be at the screen anyway. The easiest way to increase your hourly is to have more options. Whereas if you're just betting, if you just have a FanDuel account, you might find 5 bets an hour. But if you have a FanDuel, DraftKings, BetRivers, PointsBet, etc., you might find 30 bets an hour. If we're assuming the same EV, you're 6xing your hourly. So you're doing yourself a disservice if you sit down at the screen with not having money on the max amount of books, not having all your accounts funded. You're doing yourself a disservice because you want to make sure that you're getting the best hourly you can, right? This is something, if done right, that you can do for a couple hours a day and make a good side income. But to do that, you have to max your hourly. So that's one. The other key is picking the right time. When are you going hunting, right? I don't know. I know hunters like to wake up really early. Again, I'm not a hunter myself, but you have to pick the right time. There's certain times during the day when there's going to be a lot of movement, and movement's good. You want movement because movement is what we're betting off of, right? So you want to be around at times when the market's moving. I think I've heard anecdotally that like 10 a.m. to noon or 9 to 11 a.m. is a good time for basketball. There's like an early amount of movement around then. And then you have a lot of movement that's like an hour before kickoff, tip off, whatever it is, when players might be getting ruled in or out, or maybe people were waiting to get bigger positions down. But whatever it is, it's going to change. So I can't tell you now what time you need to sit down. It's up to you to go research and see when the most movement's happening. Try a couple different times out. Try them out multiple times. And soon you'll figure out what are the best hours. And then you just want to make sure you're sitting down at those hours. You're at the odds screen. You're ready to go. You have your accounts funded. You're there at the right hours. Now you're starting to gather information. Make sure you're pulling up the bet history and seeing, okay, what are the limits? What has the price done? So you don't have to go back and recheck it. You're like pretty understanding, okay, this game's been moving in this direction. The limit increased and it actually went back this way. So if XYZ happens, then I'll bet. And just make sure you sit down and start gathering the information while you're not betting, trying to figure out the pulse, get a pulse on the market. Where did things open? Where are they now? How has the movement been one direction? Has it been back and forth? After you've done this and gotten yourself kind of familiar with the territory, then all it is just waiting for those slam dunk bets, betting them, and then doing a post-mortem on your sessions, right? So this is very important, especially at first. And your post-mortem should include tracking your closing line value. Closing line value is the difference between the price you get and the price that a bet is when the game kicks off, tips off, whatever it is. And you have positive closing line value if you get a better price than whatever the price is when the game kicks off. And you have negative closing line value if you get a worse price. Now there's a whole argument around how do you actually judge closing line value, because you need to remove the VIG, get the true probability, reapply it to your VIG. Right now, I want you to focus on just getting positive closing line value. I do think that the way a bet moves, if you get positive CLV, you have more EV than just the straight DVIG of the closing line in your line. Because what's happening is you bet -7 and it goes to -7.5, -8. It means that other smart bettors out there bet -7. For them to bet -7, they must think the true line is like -9. Again, this is without key numbers in football. Please don't skewer me for this, but they're thinking the true value is much higher. So in my opinion, the true value resides between the number you got and a number that's slightly higher. So getting positive closing line value consistently is a good sign. So that's what you want to start off with, right? I wouldn't worry too much about trying to devig all of your CLV, but just making sure a large percentage of your bets have a positive CLV result is an important way to start. And if you make sure those bets are the slam dunk bets that we're talking about, it's going to be even more useful, right? But you have to track it. You got to be honest about it. So track your CLV, track your winnings. Maybe do this with a friend and you can hold each other accountable, see who can get the most CLV, whatever it is, right? So this is just, this is important because what you track, you care about. If you don't track it, you don't care. That's kind of that's not my phrase, but it's something I definitely live my life by, or try to live my life by. I'm certainly guilty of not tracking things, but tracking leads to improvement, leads to caring, right? So care about getting good prices, care about showing that you've gotten good prices over that session. And if you haven't, at least you know, right? And you can start, breaking down the bets and thinking, oh, was I wrong to follow that book when they moved, or that certain, oh, that's interesting that the totals seem to go up and then come down, or whatever it is. You'll see trends, and trends that I don't know about, right? Like these are going to be specialized trends within your market, but you'll start to see more and more interesting patterns that you can bet on. Start with the slam dunk, start with the easy stuff, but once you get into the market, you're going to see a lot of stuff that we can't cover in this course, and that's going to be unique to that market, unique to that day, week, month, team, whatever it is, right? So always be tracking, always be writing things down, journal some of your thoughts during your session. The more that you can review your session and have some kind of objective review of it. All right, so we know who participates in the market, how it works, how we can find good information, use it, review it. We've got a strategy. We're looking for the slam dunk bets. We know how the market works, and we're ready to go make some money. So, this is, and the thing is about this lesson, and I want to make sure it's known that this is not the best way to sports bet, but it's has to be understood by someone who wants to be a great bettor, which would be like coming up with bets on your own. You're going to need to understand how the market works to be testing your own hypotheses. Like you can't go to the next step before learning how to be a trader in the sports betting markets. And this lesson is not a be all end all. I'm hoping that I held some of your attention long enough where I gave you a decent strategy to understand how to go from zero to being a trader in the markets. And you'll certainly get much better with practice and experience from there. But, I do want to say that this is kind of step 2 of being a great bettor, right? There's many steps after, but you can't skip this one. So I think this is all very important. This is stuff I use every day. Even if I come up with my own number, certainly when I go to trade on it, I'm thinking about all of this stuff. And I could come up with my own number and see how the market's moving and decide, I'm probably wrong. I don't bet, right? So I'm always hitting the gas or hitting the brakes based on what the market's doing, even if I'm coming up with my own number on something or originating, right? So this is a lesson for everybody. And I think it's important to understand the market outside of just arbitrage or an odds screen telling you this is a 54% bet, or this bet has 2.5% EV. You got to understand how it all works. That's the only way you're gonna have a long-term career in this, because to do something well, you have to understand it at a deep level. And I think some of these services that spit out 2%, 3% edge, here's an ARB, like they do the better great service of making it easy. But for anybody who's trying to have some longevity and understand what's going on and make a lot of money, I do think it does them a slight disservice by making it by not forcing them to think a little deeper. So that's what I want us all to do, is just to be thinking about this and trying to get better and understanding when market conditions change, right? Because certainly they will. And if you're thinking about sports betting holistically as an interaction between books and bettors and different people who have different incentives, you're going to be more likely to pick up on the changes. So again, I hope I hope people like this. I really am passionate about betting education. I think like this is an absolute necessity to think about sports betting as a trader before you do anything else in the space. So I enjoyed putting this together, and I hope you get a lot out of it.